and welcome to Life Without Limits, my new webinar series. So this is webinar 2, and I've been having a chat with Karen behind the scenes to think about what we're going to talk about today. And she's had such an interesting career history that I'm just absolutely delighted to welcome Karen today. So I guess we'll just get started, really. Karen, can you, I've put on LinkedIn who you are, but so you're CEO and Vice-Chancellor at Cranfield University. And we met, I think, because we were both part of an online event. But actually thinking about, you were there in person at Cranfield and I was online, I think, at an event, which... so I think Professor Mark Jolly at Cranfield must have introduced us, and I heard you talking about your background and your life, and you're a vice chancellor, which, you know, if anyone doesn't know, is like basically the CEO of a university. And I just thought you were really down to earth, a really interesting person, and wanted to get to know you basically. And so I think I must have messaged you on LinkedIn, and then when I visited Cranfield as part of the Transfire project, which is led by Mark Jolly, Professor Mark Jolly, then we got to meet up in person, which was great, and kind of kept in touch ever since. So it's probably a couple of years ago now, I imagine. Thanks so much for joining me today. It's really great to have you here for my second episode of my webinars, and it'd be great, really, if you could just give us a bit about your background and tell us kind of like, you know, where did you start off, and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, Sue, thank you for having me on. It's a delight to talk to you, and it feels like we're just, you know, two old friends having a chat. So,
yeah,
you know, it sort of comes over that way to the audience, and we've got no idea how many people are watching us. So, you know, but equally, you know, when I met you, Sue, I thought this is a woman I'd like to get to know more. You know, down to earth, honest, and we had some fantastic conversations, and we've kept up the conversation ever since. And we've got a lot in common, I think. You know, and it never ceases to amaze me when I meet people who aren't down to earth, because, you know, why not? You know, but anyway,
I always think like life is easier if you just are who you are, really.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's, you know, putting on a pretense is not good, is it? So anyway, yeah. So I'll start with my background. So I'm an engineer by background. I come from a small village in the Forest of Dean, where not many people went to university. Certainly I was the first in my family to go to university, and that's normal for a lot of people of my age, actually, unless you're at a posh school or, you know, your parents went to university or so on. But, you know, my dad was a mechanic. He'd been in the Air Force during the war, after the war, and growing up, my mum had done all sorts of jobs, but growing up, he had a garage, and she kind of, you know, brought up the kids and helped him with the garage as well. So, you know, it was a tough life, really, I think, for them. You know, coming out of rationing after the war and everything. So we're quite a humble family. She came from a farming family, so third one down of 4 sisters.
Right.
And I think my dad always wanted a boy to sort of follow in his footsteps of football and sport and engineering and stuff. And I think when I came along as the third one, he'd almost given up. Then my sister came along 6 years after me, my younger sister, and I think he'd definitely given up on trying for a boy by that time. And so at the age of 6, I think I was allowed to be a tomboy. And I really love that, you know, I was interested in, I was always curious, and I was interested in, you know, taking things apart and finding out how things worked and asking questions. And I remember clearly, you know, when Concorde flew over our house in its test flights in the 70s, I can remember asking questions like, well, you know, how are they going to, you know, how do they take off, and how do they do this? And then the moon landings as well in the 60s. I can remember asking questions like, you know, how are they going to get back to Earth, and how does that work? So I always had an engineer's mind, which is one of curiosity. So I went to a local comprehensive school. It was a tough school to be at, actually, to be honest. And again, not many people went to university, and if you were, it was troubled times if you wanted to work hard, put it that way. For many people it was in comprehensive schools, but yeah, you survive, don't you? And in the sixth form I can remember kind of wanting to go to university but not knowing anything about it, wanting to be an engineer but not knowing what that was, how I would do that, but also worried about going to university because of the cost of it. And remember, in those days we used to get a grant to go to university. There's no such thing as fees, but I was, I guess, worried about not going out to work and spending that time, not being able to work full time. And it was my art teacher, amazing woman. There was a subject I hated, which I won't go into, but I used to, and this was in the fifth form, I used to hide in the art block to avoid going to this one lecture, and she just took me under her wing. So when I was in the sixth form, I wasn't doing art at all, but she still took me under her wing, and she did all the finding out for me. So she, and there wasn't the internet in those days, so it was really difficult. She did all the research for me, and she found out that you could be sponsored by a company to go to university, study engineering and practice engineering in that company. And that's what I did.
Wow.
So yeah, all down to my art teacher actually, and her encouragement. Really
not many people can say that they're an engineer because of their art teacher. And that's really interesting when you were talking about like kind of being a tomboy and stuff, because got lots of women that I've spoken to that are sort of engineers or in tech have had mums or dads that have kind of allowed them to be a bit different to the, I guess, stereotype of what we're supposed to be as girls. And thinking back for me as well, I was born, and then my mum had twins, my brother and sister, when I was 5, and I think so after that my mum was mainly looking after the twins, which makes sense. And so I think then I used to hang out with my dad, and I think one of the reasons I probably have gone into and feel quite comfortable in tech is because I used to do loads of things with my dad, and I used to fix the car with him, used to go to football with him, that sort of thing. And I was always interested in vehicles, like trains, planes, engines, all of that kind of stuff. And like maybe if I hadn't been in that sort of position in the family, then that wouldn't have happened. I don't know. So I think it's an interesting thing to think about. So yeah, it was interesting. You said the same thing almost.
Yeah, and that was the same. I was interested in fast cars, motorbikes. And that was a bit of a downfall really for me in the sixth form, because I discovered boys, motorbikes and pubs, various orders that you want, and didn't do as well in my A levels as I perhaps should have done. And I took 4 maths, physics, chemistry and further maths. I failed 2.
Oh, wow. At least you got some. I haven't got any.
We've talked about this before, haven't we? So I did manage to, and my physics teacher then stepped in because I didn't know what to do. I assumed I wouldn't be able to go to university or work for Rolls Royce. And so, I just didn't know what to do. And he said, just get on the phone, Karen, ring Rolls Royce, tell them what's happened, and it was Cardiff University, it was UIST in those days, ring them. And I did both phone calls, and they both said, well, if Rolls Royce said, well, if Cardiff will take you, then we'll stand by you. And then when I ran Cardiff, they said, well, if Rolls Royce is sponsoring you, then we'll stand by you. So it's kind of, okay, let's do it then.
Amazing.
Glad. And they both, I guess they both took a risk on me, which was great. And I think you need a bit of that in your life, don't you, for somebody to stand by you and take a risk, even though I'd messed up.
No, absolutely. No, I think life is definitely much easier when you've got people supporting you. That's one thing I've really learned as I've got older. I think I didn't even realise that I wasn't particularly supported earlier on. It's only when I've had the support you suddenly realise, wow, life suddenly got a lot easier, really. Well, amazing. So then you went on to university and started your career. How did that go?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I mean, I went to Rolls Royce first to start the apprenticeship with craft apprenticeships, and it was just brilliant. I absolutely loved it. And then I joined the university, and again loved that. And what I liked, because it was a thin sandwich course, it was brilliant, because in the holidays I went back to Rolls Royce and worked, and then I had a 6-month placement with Rolls Royce, then 6 months in the university, and I found that doing both kept my interest in both, if you see what I mean. When I was studying, I could see the application of what I was studying in work. When I was in work, it really opened my mind to all the possibilities of careers, and and the use of the engineering course. So they both things reinforced each other, and I really, really enjoyed it. Wouldn't have changed it for the world. It was really good.
And so what's a thin sandwich again?
I think sandwich course was kind of like, rather than doing a block of university, it was the way they organised it. So there was thin placements in university, and then thin placements, and then complicated thing. You either did a thick sandwich or a thin sandwich.
I remember thin and thick placements, and I guess I did a thick. I did like my third year, working for Haringey Council, and then came back and did my final year at the university.
Okay. But mine was thick because it was interspersed all the way through.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then, so where'd you go after that?
So when I left university and went back to Rolls Royce, I never intended being an academic, and I wanted to work for Rolls Royce, and it was a particularly hot summer, and I had particular frustrations at Rolls Royce, which I won't go into now. But I was young, I was headstrong, I wasn't I wanted more to life than what I thought Rolls Royce were offering me at the time. It's probably not a good decision looking back, but I was restless. And I'd really enjoyed doing project work at university, and and I was talking to somebody in a pub, and they said, "Oh, you should do a PhD." So and they said, "Oh, my supervisor is looking for an engineer to do a PhD." So I went in and found out all about it, and I thought, "God, this is going to be great." Doing research for 3 years. So I went back and did a PhD then, but still not intending to do a PhD with the object of being an academic. I did a PhD because I like research and development. And then, so after my PhD, I went to work, which was sponsored again. So I got sponsors for that. And I also worked in a pub to make ends meet through that time. So, and I've always said, whenever I've taken a risk in my career, I've always said, it's okay taking this risk because I can always work as a barmaid, because when you've been a barmaid, you never lose those skills. So it's one of these things that people know me for, but it stood me in step because I could always work, whatever happened, I could always work.
Absolutely. I think those people skills are really important as well, and I think, like, the further you get in your career, in a way, being able to talk to anybody, like, about anything is a massive skill. And if you've kind of learned that, without even trying, in a way, I worked as a waitress in a cafe, so I think, that kind of helped a bit in the same way. Then it's kind of,
isn't it?
It's undervalued, I think, those kind of job roles. Like, my daughter, Leah, my youngest, worked in Boots for about 6 months. And the difference in how she was just being able to talk to people, just people that she didn't know at all, was massive. And now she's confident to just chat to anybody, whereas before that she really wasn't.
Yeah, my daughter's the same. She worked in a local restaurant, and then she worked in a hotel in town. She got lots of training through that. She met loads of people, and it really brings them out of themselves at an age where you need bringing out of yourself a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, so then you ended up in academia at some point. Yeah, you ended up in academia at some point. Have we got there yet?
Well, I finished my PhD, and I definitely didn't want to go into academia. So then I got on the job trail, and that's quite difficult, actually, because when you go back into engineering, people say, "Oh, you've got a PhD, you're overqualified for a grad scheme." Right. So that was quite a difficult time, but I managed to convince a local firm called AB Electronic Products that they wanted me. And had a great time there as well. I worked there for a few years. I kind of rose up the ranks, and they gave me, again, people put their faith in me there. They gave me a lot of responsibility very early on. I wasn't on a sort of conventional grad scheme, but they put me in charge of the drawing office. They put me in charge of the workshop. They put me in charge of all sorts of things. I met some great people there. I learned a lot. I traveled a lot. I did a lot of design work, a lot of development engineering, and so on. Good times again as well. I think, I think sometimes being a woman in that situation was hard, because you feel like you have to prove yourself all the time. And you get some ridiculous things happen, but actually it all adds to your experience, and I think that on the whole it was absolutely great. It just happened to be at the end of the 80s by this time, when there was a recession, and the company was making a lot of people redundant. And again, just by chance, I played hockey locally, and I was chatting in the pub after hockey to a guy who was a professor in the university, and they were setting up a new course, and I said, "Oh, I can help you. I can give you some advice from industry point of view." Yeah. So I was giving him advice, loads and loads, on this new course they were setting up, and then one day, and it was a really transformational day in my life, because we'd just made quite a few people redundant, and it was a Friday afternoon, never forget it, and people had just been told they had to go and be sent off, and the difficult thing was I was the one who had to tell them.
Wow.
Without any choice of who was going, so it was just a horrible day. And this professor rang up, and he said, this course you've been helping me on, well, we've got a vacancy, and it's only for 1 year, and it's not as much money. And I just went, I'll take it. And he said, no, you're not supposed to do that. And I said, no, honestly, if you knew what I've been through. So it was just like that. And obviously, I had to do everything for it. But so I made a leap of faith, really, because I took a 1-year post, insecure, less money, but I just felt right. It just felt, I'd been helping this guy. It just felt right to then, go and do that. So it was great. And it was a course called Integrated Engineering. There's quite a few of them now, but we were one of the trailblazers on that. And it was setting up a course that was very much geared around industry needs and in conjunction with industry. And I was the person who was getting all the industrial sponsors and talking to them about what the course needed and so on. And then quite soon after that, I just realized I absolutely loved being in a university. They gave me some experience of teaching. I loved the experience of teaching. And I just, so I took a full-time job when it came up, and that was it, really.
Okay. It's a bit similar to me, I have to be honest. At my PhD, my second supervisor for my final year project said, what do you think about doing a PhD? And I said, I'd love to do a PhD, not telling him that I didn't know what a PhD was. But then when I found out I was doing research, I'd really loved doing the research on my final year project. So applied for a position and got it. And then did part-time teaching to make money, basically, because then I was a parent with 3 kids. And it was quite well paid. And I was just absolutely petrified of teaching the class to start with. But actually, once I got used to it, I absolutely loved it as well. I still do. I really love teaching. It's such good fun, isn't it?
Well, we've been quite privileged in some ways, even though we didn't have privileged backgrounds, because I think it's a privilege to spend that time doing research. What a joy spending 3 years PhD just investigating things and finding things out. And then again, to spend time with young people, I always felt I was learning just as much from them as they were learning from me. It's great. And the satisfaction you get when you're sort of helping a group of students who don't understand something complex, and then they suddenly get it, or you work it out together, and it's just brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely wonderful. Yeah, no, that's really cool. And so what were your next steps after that?
So then I was just in the higher education system as a lecturer, and I'll tell you a funny story. In industry, I'd been used to sort of getting promotion quite quickly. If you work hard and do everything your boss tells you, you get promotion. And I didn't really understand the academic promotion procedure, so I applied for promotion. After I'd been there a few years, I'd taken on everything that anybody had asked me to do. So I was admissions tutor, and the course numbers were going up, and I was designing courses, and and every time the head of department saw me, he kept saying, wow, you're brilliant, this is brilliant, everything's brilliant. And so I thought, maybe I should apply for promotion. Well, I didn't have any research papers or any grants in, I got turned down. I remember in those days there were so few people that applied for promotion that you used to have a chat with the Vice-Chancellor when you didn't get promoted. I was so angry at not being promoted. I couldn't understand it. And he kept saying things like, well, you're too much of a team player, Karen. You should do things for yourself. You should do some research for yourself. I just thought, this is all wrong, isn't it? But you learn from your mistakes, don't you? And so I found out. I read the instructions. Then I found out what I needed to get promoted, and quite a few years later, I found it quite difficult, that first promotion to senior lecturer, because I hadn't done a postdoc or anything like that. So I hadn't set up my research. So I had to set up my research from scratch, really. I had to start a new research area, which was acoustic emission for non-destructive testing of things, which I'd done in my PhD, but I had to kind of, my supervisor had left by then. So I had to kind of set it up from scratch. And and I just went out and, you say you're able to talk to people. I went out and talked to people and asked them what to do. And I can remember in a full circle back to Cranfield, I can remember there was a colleague at Cranfield who was doing acoustic emission, who I'd seen his papers. So I just rang him up and said, can I come and talk to you about setting up a research group? And he was fantastic. He gave me loads of advice. So, things, you learn your way through these systems, don't you?
Yeah, completely. And I think, because I found actually from setting up BCS Women, so setting up a network, people ask questions on the group and things like, when should I go for promotion? So I was reading reading answers to trying to find the answers online to those sort of questions so that I could help people that were in the group. But then actually, then when it came, and the answer was, well, whenever you can, if you can apply for it. And so that's what I did. And then amazingly, I kept getting promoted. But I think it is just part of knowing that you can, and also looking at, what the criteria are. And I think that's another thing that I've sort of heard over and over. I don't know if it's whether as an academic, as a woman, you kind of like get asked to do the more sort of caring, in quotes, things, which don't get you the brownie points, or if that, I don't know. We don't want to get into a debate around nature, nurture and academia. But I think it's really interesting that so many women don't realise that basically that just what you were saying, you have to put yourself first and think about, okay, what do I need to do to get promoted, and look at the criteria rather than trying to do a good job, in quotes, sort of for everybody. So, I mean, is that your experience as well?
Yeah, I think so. But on the other hand, all of those jobs that I did, not realising that they were all being thrown on me, they've actually given me brilliant experience that has stood me in good stead later.
Yeah.
So, I don't think I think, in any industry, promotion and, everything like that, you have to work hard, don't you? And you have to, you don't get places by not working relatively hard or doing things well. So I think all those jobs, I look back on all those jobs and I don't feel exploited. I just feel it was an opportunity to learn. And then once you start being able to be more choosy in the jobs you pick and the ones you say no to, then, you can be more discerning. And I also think that one of the thing that I actually realized, which really helped me, was the power of collaborating with others in other universities.
Right.
And that's what really got me onto the right track, because I worked with other people, generous people who are still friends in universities all across the UK. And if any of them are watching, thank you, you know who you are. But, the generosity of other people, meeting them at conferences, talking to them, writing a research grant together, or, finding mutual interest and writing a paper together. I think the more external collaboration you can have as an academic, the better it is. That's really, really helped me.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Okay, so then next steps, where did you go after that? Was that senior lecturer?
Yeah, just sort of slowly through the ranks, really, probably more slowly than I would have done had I not worked in industry, I think. But I wasn't worried because I was enjoying my job, so taught for many years. Got promoted senior lecturer, reader, and then professor. And then people started asking me, oh, are you going to apply for this leadership role? And are you going to apply for that leadership role? So then I, head of engineering was the big one. It's interesting, these things, something about age and gender and not looking old enough. I can remember when I first thought about the role of head of department, head of engineering. I asked a few people, and one person said, "You're too nice to be a boss." And I thought, well, why shouldn't bosses be nice?
Horrible.
So I thought, that's a strange reason. And then another person said, "You're too young." And I said, "You know how old I am?" Trying to get up to my full height of 5'4". And they said no. And I told them, they said, oh, well, of course you're old enough, then go for it. So there's misperception.
Yeah.
know, and I think when you're a woman and you probably look younger than maybe male colleagues of the same age, there's a perception that you're just, you're not ready for that. And I really hate that saying, actually, when we're talking about a promotion case or anything, or an interview, and somebody says they're not ready, I just think, well, why? What does ready mean?
Yeah.
I mean, you're too young. And I don't think there's ever, you're never too young to take on leadership roles. So
yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's true. So yeah, so then so we just carry on through to your position now. Like, how did you get to being Vice-Chancellor from where you were then?
Wow. Well, I kind of have my daughter to thank for this. But I also had a lot of other people. So yeah, I was really, I went through the leadership sort of journey at Cardiff, for want of a better word. So I was head of engineering. Then we reorganized into a college structure, and I was the first head of the College of Physical Sciences and Engineering. So I was then on the senior executive, and then I became deputy vice-chancellor at Cardiff. And in that position, my boss, Colin Reardon, who was one of the best bosses I've ever had, wonderful, inspiring leader, a quiet leader, but a very sort of supportive leader. He kept saying, I don't want to lose you, Karen, but you should consider being a vice-chancellor because you'd be good at it, and I'd love to work with you as a vice-chancellor. So kind of in my mind. And then the headhunters, the famous headhunters, they come round and they present jobs, and I kept saying no to them. And I kept saying, there's this vice-chancellor, and I kept saying no. And, and my daughter said to me, and she works in a recruitment and branding agency, she said, well, when are you ever going to say yes to any of these? What would you really want to, where would you really like to go? And I said, I don't know. And I said, well, it would have to be small, and it would probably have to be STEM specialist, and I was, given this list of requirements. And she said, oh, what sort of university would that be? And I just said, I do know a university, Cranfield, which would be brilliant. And she said, both my son and my daughter, it's about Christmas time 2020, and they said, where's that? Because they'd never heard of Cranfield, because it's a specialist postgrad. And they hadn't looked for that. So I said what every good mum says to their kids when they ask a question. I said, look it up. So my daughter Googled it. Other search engines do exist. She said, oh my goodness, mum. She said, you're never going to believe this. And when she Googled Cranfield, the first title came up was Vice-Chancellor Sir Peter Gregson to step down from role as VC at Cranfield. So she said, you've got to go for it. And I did, and I got it. And I think it was I think the secret of that is that I wasn't just, I know people who just want to be a vice-chancellor and they apply for every single job that's going without having an interest in that university. I think this is probably the only university I would have applied. I would have left. I was very, very happy at Cardiff. So I've just seen a chart that I've just seen. Great, Cranfield's cool. But I was very, very happy at Cardiff. Cardiff's a brilliant university. I've been there all my life. I'd there, I'd worked there, and it was going to have to be somewhere special to take me away from a role at Cardiff, and Cranfield is special. So so that was 2021 I started here.
Okay. Oh, cool. So sorry if I missed out, but so were you at Cardiff all the way through, basically? Before that? Wow.
Yeah, I was at Cardiff all the way through for a couple of reasons. And actually, that's a really good sort of conversation line, because many people told me that I would progress better and get faster promotion if I left Cardiff and went elsewhere. And I always said, but I don't want to leave Cardiff. I'm happy. So by then I've got two children, and my children were, going through school. My mum actually, who lived within about an hour's drive from Cardiff, so in the Forest of Dean where I was brought up. She was getting frail and elderly for that time. And we'd lost my dad quite early. So, she needed looking after. And although there's four of us, she still needed looking after, and she needed us. So, I didn't really want to move anywhere for that. So, there's timing to all these things as well. But I was perfectly happy at Cardiff, and I didn't regret not moving for the career, the fast career progression, because I loved Cardiff, and I loved all my colleagues. I had a brilliant research group. I still keep in touch with them, and meet up with them, and great times.
Oh, lovely. That's so nice. Well, so let's move on a little bit then, and amazing career trajectory. That was great. And then talk about different bosses and kind of like leadership. I know in our chat before you mentioned one in particular who wasn't the most polite. So
well,
yeah,
I'll tell the story in probably less colourful terms than I told you, and I'll spare the details to spare the blushes. But I did have one boss who I'd worked up to telling him I was pregnant, and I'd been hiding my pregnancy with a lab coat. I thought for until I was about 16 weeks, because having experienced miscarriage, I didn't want to. You don't. Once you've experienced miscarriage, you don't want you delay telling people, don't you?
Yeah.
So I'd worked up how to tell him, how I was going to manage the time, how to tell him what I was going to do, and so on. And when I went in and said, I've got something to tell you, he completely deflated me by saying that he already knew. And I just said, how? Because I hadn't told anybody. And he mentioned the changing shape of my body and that everybody had noticed. And it was just I felt sick, really. I felt, they've been looking at me, talking about me, and it was just the wrong way to treat somebody who's, going pregnant and going to go on maternity leave. So that's not how to treat people. And I'm sure that wouldn't happen now. I hope it doesn't anyway. But so there are bosses and bosses, aren't there?
Absolutely.
I think we all learn from having bosses. You learn a lot from bosses, whether you learn good habits or bad habits. You learn not to have the bad habits, and you learn the good habits. And I've had some brilliant bosses as well who've been supportive. When I was in industry at AB Electronics, actually, I had a really great boss who was the chief technical officer, who basically took me under his wing and taught me a lot technically and gave me opportunities. I think a good leader spots people who are willing to take opportunities and willing to learn, and works with them and helps them to learn. I think that's the sign of a good leader, actually, talent spotting and encouraging people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, being, like you are, down to earth, I think, and I think I am as well, try to be. I think can make a real difference too, and just being straightforward. It's interesting. When I got my first role as head of proper management role, I moved to a new university, and someone, like, in the first week said something to me in the corridor, like, basically, I don't trust you because you're a manager. And I thought, you don't know me at all. And it kind of helped me to realize that actually, once you're a manager, people just see you in a different, not everybody, some people will just see you in a completely different light. You're the same person. It is quite weird. That was a real surprise for me.
Yeah, it is quite surprising, because I think all of us, we feel the same inside as we've always done. Yeah. And you may get promoted, and you're keen to make a difference, and you're keen to help people and help the organization. But people see it as sometimes see it as a power thing. And I think, there's a difference. Power is a strange word. And I think some bosses do take on jobs in leadership because they want power, but it's not about power. It's about encouragement, and it's about developing people in the organization. It's about connecting people, but it's never about the power of a title. No. And that's why I don't really like titles. I try and encourage people to, call me whatever they feel comfortable, but Karen's my name, so that's the best thing to call me. But I know some people like a bit of more formality, and that's fine too. But I try to be, I like people, so I try to get to know people, and I try, hopefully people get to know me and trust me, because if you can't trust people until you know them, can you?
No, true. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, actually, earlier on we were talking about mentors, weren't we, and how important mentors are in terms of your career. So what would you say is kind of important in a mentor? How do you choose mentors? How do you approach mentors? How do you find mentors?
Yeah, it's interesting, and there's so many different ways that you can find mentors. Quite often when you go on leadership schemes, they'll allocate you a mentor. Right. I've been allocated mentors where things haven't worked out because we haven't clicked, and you just let them kind of wither away. I've I've asked people to mentor me, and they've generously said yes, and that's been great. I think it's always worth asking people, because the worst they can say is no, I'm too busy or I haven't got time, but always ask for mentorship. And there's different types of mentorships. Some mentors are, you mentor people through a certain phase in their lives or a certain thing they want to do. And other mentorship is it goes on for longer. I would say we have to recognize the difference between mentoring and coaching. I'm not a coach. I've never trained as a coach. I wouldn't know how to help people in a coaching way. Although I guess mentoring sometimes slips over into coaching a little bit when you want to help people do something. But mentoring is about talking, listening, opening people's eyes, trying to make connections. But I also think there's lots of hidden mentors that I've had that I didn't realize were mentoring me until much later on, when I look back and I think, gosh, that person was a silent mentor for me. So I've recognized that mentorship in retrospect, if you like. But yeah, I think you don't just rely on one mentor. Fill your life with as many mentors as you can fit in, really, because you need them for different things, don't you?
Yeah, no, that's true, and I think that's something I didn't really realize early on as well. So we're also going to talk about kind of having credibility as a woman in leadership. I mean, how do you? I think hopefully things are getting better than they were when we started out in our careers. But have you had any challenges along the way? And if you have, how have you overcome them?
I think, I think that when you're a minority, whether you're, a minority by gender or disability or race or ethnicity or whatever, it's harder to feel included. And I think we all do that, don't we? And I think when it's harder to feel included, it's harder to have your own personal confidence in a leadership role. So I spent many years working in engineering. And for a start, I tried to hide the fact that I was a woman, which I don't think helps, because I think I wasn't being authentic. So I kicked myself in a way. But, that's fine. That's what it was. But I also think that I know many women, and it's a gross generalization, but I know many women who make sure they're absolutely ready for every job before they take it. So we tend to hold ourselves back. And then when we get into leadership positions, and I've talked to loads of women about this, and again, it's not every woman, but loads of us have this characteristic that we get into leadership positions, and then we have the old imposter syndrome, and then we agonize about whether what we're doing is right. And I think as a result of that, we probably, over prepare for everything. But so I think that's the thing that I would say to people: just have confidence in your leadership ability, but check it out. Check with people. I still check with people. I did a big talk at the university today, and when I came out, I checked with people. Was that all right? Was I clear enough? Was this fine? And I just think just constantly having people who will tell you the truth around you is really important. But I also think it's really important to be authentic as a leader. I would say don't try and be what you're not. I know there used to be all sorts of advice in probably, I don't know, in the 90s or the early 2000s, dress to impress and, all these things. And I just think that was just such badly timed advice, I think, because I think who you are and what you bring, and recognizing that everybody brings different things to every leadership role, and that we have leadership at all levels in an organization. Just because you're at the top of the pyramid structure that we tend to have doesn't mean you're the only leader. So recognizing distributed leadership and listening to people's ideas is really important for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what would you say is the biggest challenge then you've had so far in your career?
Yeah, I think I would say honestly, my own biggest challenge has been believing in myself.
Right.
The agonies I put myself through when I don't think I'm good enough, and that's a personal challenge which I've learnt to live with. I think some of the challenges you get when you're an outsider, I think that's also a big challenge. When you're the only woman in the room, it presents all the same for any colleagues who are in a minority. That presents its own challenges that you know, feeling like an outsider and feeling like you don't belong is a biggest challenge, I guess. And they're all tied up together, aren't they?
Yeah. And so, well, so how do you, I mean, I've had the same issues. How do you manage that?
Well, I think I've had a lot of help from mentors, I would say. So, you know, listening to mentors who can reassure you, talking to colleagues, you know, I would say surrounding yourself with positive colleagues who are fun to be with and keep your feet on the ground.
Yeah.
But give you encouragement as well. I think that's really important, because nobody, you know, this isn't a solo sport, is it? Well, certainly engineering is, but I don't think any job is. So yeah, surrounding yourself with people who you trust and who you can take advice from is a good thing. And as I said before, you know, just having a little bit of belief in yourself, recognizing that just because somebody speaks louder, that they're not the most, you know, it's not the person who speaks the loudest in the room who's got the best ideas. It's often the quietest person in the room who's got the best ideas.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think maybe it's changing, hopefully, from like kind of our generation. But I think, you know, I was brought up really to kind of keep quiet. And, you know, like I can remember my dad saying, don't speak until you're spoken to, when I was younger. And I think kind of that being brought up like that then meant that it was quite hard to actually say when I had something to say. And so that, I think that's one of the challenges I've had, is to, even though I didn't realize that's what was going on, I think that's probably where it came from, is just to get over that thing of, actually, I've got an opinion, and it's absolutely fine for me to say what my opinion is. Whereas I think sort of like, you know, in my more junior days, I wouldn't know if it was right for me to say anything or not. And I think, you know, gradually become more confident. And again, like you're saying, supported by the people around me. And I really agree, you know, like if you've got people around you that are positive and supportive, I feel like you can do anything, you know. Whereas, you know, sort of earlier on in my life, I didn't have that so much, and had quite a lot of sort of negative feedback on anything I did. So that can just be so soul destroying, and it's very hard to feel confident if the people around you are being negative about you or what you're doing.
But you know, Sue, I'm really surprised to hear that, because you strike me as somebody who's, you know, really put yourself out on a limb and done things, and, you know, your Bletchley Park stuff and your you know, computer club stuff and everything. You know, you've done amazing things, and you seem to have just smashed through any barrier. I mean, what's the biggest barrier that you faced, do you think?
So many. Where do I start? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the biggest barrier, it's probably just like you're saying, is like my own perception of myself, and being able to just be confident and get out there and do the things that I thought were the right thing to do. And I think, you know, like setting up the BCS Women Group in 1998, because I just had an amazing time at a Women in Tech conference, and I wasn't having amazing times going to like computer science academic conferences and trying to network. So I kind of feel like I've done things which I thought were for other people, really. You know, I set up BCS Women because I'd had this experience, and I just thought, well, I'm sure there's other women that are having this experience as well. So why don't I set up a group and help everybody, kind of thing. And like, again, with Bletchley Park, I thought, well, Bletchley Park can't close. I've got to do something about it. Whereas it's always been harder to actually do something for myself. I mean, I kind of feel like I'm used to it now, but you know, you shouldn't have to get to the age of 61 to be able to feel like that. You know, I think I could have done a lot more if I'd been more confident early on, definitely. But, you know, I mean, it is what it is. I'm quite happy with how things have gone. But I definitely wasn't always confident at all. You know, I've had massive issues with confidence over the years.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I talk through with people is that sometimes when you want to do something really badly and you're very passionate about it, it can seem like too big a challenge. And I like breaking things down into smaller challenges. I like breaking things down into days rather than weeks, you know, or hours rather than days. And I think that, you know, you can approach things by just doing things step by step in a logical way. This is the engineering brain talking, I'm sorry, rather than just seeing everything as a huge obstacle to overcome.
No, absolutely. And I think that is, really, really simple, but really, really good advice, because I think you can just get totally overwhelmed with you know, something large that you've got to do, like writing a book, for example, in my case, which I think 5 years later I still haven't submitted to the publishers. Whereas if, you know, I could write a blog post now, you know, I could just go off and write on, you know, but it's like 100, maybe 1,000. No, I don't know how many, 200 blog posts to write a book, right? So. What is it? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step or something, you know, that kind of thing. I think I've sort of gradually learned that over the years, and not to get too overwhelmed with big projects. But I mean, I still do. And then, like, you know, like something like this conversation reminds me, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I do know that. I just forgotten.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, just one step at a time, and that's good advice in life as well as work. Just take things one step at a time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I can't believe it, but we've been talking for 45 minutes already. So I don't actually know if anyone's watching, but I hope they are. So if there is anyone watching, do put questions in the chat. We've got wonderful Nicola Martin, who was my guest last week, who very kindly volunteered to check LinkedIn, because we had a bit of a disconnect between LinkedIn and Restream, which is the platform that we're in now, in terms of questions coming through. So I think Nicola will tell me if there's any questions coming through from LinkedIn. But yeah, so do put your questions in the chat to for me to ask Karen, or for us to answer. So what else were we going to talk about? Giving back. So we're also going to talk about giving back and like, what did you call it? Not putting the ladder up behind you, I think.
Not pulling the ladder up behind you.
Yeah.
All sorts of things, enabling other women to shine. You know, when one woman shines, we all shine.
Yeah.
I just think, and it's not just for women, it's for everybody, really. I just think that, you know, it's so important. As I said, I've had mentors who were mentoring me, and I didn't realize, you know, they were giving back to a younger person, and I you know, I've not really thanked them, all of them, for it, because I didn't realize till later on. But it's made me realize that, you know, you have to give back. As I said, we are in a privileged position. We may have got there through hard work and everything, but it is still a privileged position.
Absolutely.
And so many people are lost these days, or, you know, or struggling. And so I just think it's really important to help whoever you can, whenever you can. So I think, you know, I mentor people. I always find, I don't know whether you mentor a lot of people, Sue, but I find that I learn more from my mentors than they learn from me. It's just amazing. They usually tend to be younger people, although I do a bit of peer-to-peer mentoring, you know, which is a joy as well. But I always learn more from people I mentor, and, you know, there's, well, you know, there's so life changes, doesn't it? So what was the case when I was younger is not the case now. So so I think it's really important to help people. I think it's really important also to talent spot. As we talked about earlier, you know, try and encourage people and spot when people are, you know, hidden, because there are a lot of people hidden. There are a lot of people doing brilliant jobs who are hidden from view, and they just don't get elevated in the right way. So, you know, helping those people, spotting them, helping develop them, and doing things when people ask you to do things. You know, giving freely of our time is something that we can do. You know, so I just think, you know, giving talks on mentoring and on all sorts of things, career development. I gave a talk for a colleague who's in a company a few months ago, and they were trying to pay me, and I just said, I don't want paying for this sort of thing. This is what I do. You know, this is sort of spreading the word, isn't it? It was, you know, it was all about diversity and inclusion and things like that, and career development. So yeah, you know, I think that sort of thing, we should give back, shouldn't we?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing is, you get so much from it, I think. You know, so like, you're making me think of, I went with some of our students from Durham to the BCS Women Lovelace Colloquium a few weeks ago, and it's just so lovely, kind of chatting to our students and seeing how they're getting on, and like, you know, like they have research posters, and I just find it so inspiring. Really, now these days, probably talking to, you know, people like my kids' age, rather than actually people more senior to me, right? So that sounds rude to you. It's not meant to be.
I think talking to, I mean, that's why it's great to be in higher education, isn't it? Because you're surrounded by people, by younger people who have got enthusiastic minds, and I think it keeps you young. Having children, my children keep me young. My children always encourage me to do things. I keep saying, "What at my age?" They say, "Gah, what's age got to do with it?" But yeah, definitely. Being with students is so uplifting, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it's really good fun. Yeah. So we've got a question. You talked about distributed leadership. Do you think women in engineering should focus on getting leadership experience this way rather than focusing on a linear journey to leadership?
Yeah, definitely. Most definitely. Yeah, because I think that if you pick up little bits of leadership experience here and there, take on, some responsibility, you have a chance to test out your skills, try out your style, work out what works for you. I think I love secondments. I think seconding people up into an acting role, to give them a taste of it before they apply for acting, for permanent roles. So yeah, definitely. And also, there are some amazing people at the beginning of their careers who deserve to move fast up the ladder. And it's only by trying out things and proving themselves, for want of a better word, but, proving themselves and giving themselves confidence that they'll be able to do that. So, when I say proving themselves, proving to yourself, I think is half the battle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually, I realised I've got a question for you that I'd like to know the answer to, which is, so you've been a Vice-Chancellor for, is it 3 years now, 2 to 3 years?
Going on 3 years, yeah.
So is it what you expected it to be or not? It'd be good to know, and what's good or difficult about being a Vice-Chancellor? Is it what you thought it would be?
It is what I thought it would be, because I'd been deputy to Colin, and he'd given me this is a brilliant leader, because he'd given me lots of opportunities to try things out. So he gave me lots of opportunities to act for him in certain roles, especially external roles. So going to meetings on the behalf of the university. So I'd kind of seen the role close hand. I'd worked closely with Colin. I almost feel like I had an apprenticeship in being a Vice-Chancellor with Colin. And so I knew the role well when I came here, although Cranfield's a different type of university, smaller and postgraduate only. I don't think there haven't been any huge surprises. There's what has uplifted me is how brilliant my colleagues are, and I've got some amazing colleagues. And in Cranfield, we always, everybody likes to be different as a university, but we are genuinely different, really close to industry. So I've really loved that part of it, and probably more close to industry than I had imagined from the outside. So that's really been lovely. I think another great thing is the network of VCs around the country. So it can be a lonely job when you're making big decisions, and you need some external context to what you're doing. You need to learn from people who are more experienced. So I've had a brilliant Vice-Chancellor mentoring me. I've had the joy of working on projects. Universities UK is a great network. And I've done work on some projects with them. I've done some work on funding in higher education, funnily enough, and some work on security. And it's a joy working with other Vice-Chancellors on those projects. I'm now on the board, so I think that's one of the things that's been surprising to me, actually, how genuinely collaborative and helpful all of the other Vice-Chancellors are.
That's really great to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, thinking about that sort of from another perspective, it sounds like the VC at Cardiff was a great boss in terms of enabling you to get lots of different experiences and
absolutely
step up now and again. So for people listening that are in management roles, then I think that's good advice and something for me to think about as well.
Yeah, because I think sometimes as a leader, you feel like you have to do everything, and it's quite hard to delegate. But actually, once you start it's not really. I mean, it's delegation is part of it, but it's also encouraging people into your world.
Yeah.
So giving a bit away, you know, letting go of control.
Yeah.
I'm not a controlling person, so I find it quite easy to let go of control and trust people.
Yeah.
And let them, you know, make mistakes and come back to me and you know, work it through together. So yes, that's how I'd describe it. Actually, giving up a little bit of control to let somebody else shine is really a really good thing.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. So we're almost out of time. Have you got any sort of last thoughts or words of advice for people?
Well, I would say, particularly to any women watching, any younger women or even older women, you know, ask for help, you know, seek mentors, seek friends, seek, you know, advisors, but just go for it, because you never know what you can do until you try it. I mean, I've had all these fancy jobs with fancy titles. Every time and they're fancy jobs with fancy titles, aren't they?
Yeah.
And whenever I've applied for one, I've always been hesitant, and I've always had to be persuaded to apply for them, actually, by other people. And I've always feared not being able to do them. And as I said, I've always thought, well, I can be a barmaid if it fails. So, you know, I've got to back up. But once I've done the job, I've realized I can do this. You know, but you don't realize what you can do until you do it. It's like, you know, it's like anything in life, you know, running a half marathon or climbing a mountain or, you know, doing something. You don't know till you try. And it's the same with work. You know, you really don't know till you try. So try it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then to finish, what's the best thing about being a vice-chancellor?
It's seeing people. It's just seeing the wonderful things that happen in universities, because universities, I mean, you and I know how universities change lives. My life was changed completely by university. Universities are still changing people's lives. So it's the ability to be part of that. It's the ability to just see how it changes lives. And it's not just the students' lives it changes, it's the staff. It's all staff, not just academic staff. You know, the university community is a great community to live in. And yeah, that's the joy of it, is seeing the fantastic things that people achieve.
Wonderful. Well, that's so fantastic. Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing all your insights and your life story, basically, with us.
People, but it was lovely talking to you, Sue.
Likewise. Next time we'll do it over a glass of wine.
Yeah, that's a deal. We definitely should.
Okay, that's really great. Thanks so much to everyone for listening, and see you next time.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. Take care. Bye.